Resources, inspiring interviews, business practices, and practical advice to take your art career to the next level. Join Sergio Gomez in today's Artist Next Level and get ready to take control of your career.
Hello, my Next Level friends. Welcome to a new episode of the Art Next Level podcast. I am very excited to be here with you once again. I want to thank you for your attention and for downloading this episode. Today, I have an interview that I really want to share with you with artist Doug Frohman. It's going to be a great interview you don't want to miss. But before that, my friend, I also want to invite you, if you haven't done so yet, to join me for the live webinar on the 7 steps to creating a winner exhibition proposal. It's a super cool webinar that Dr. Janina Gomez and we do live once or twice a week, and you can join us. We always have a great time. You join other artists from around the world who go there and are part of the webinar live. You can ask all the questions you want. We answer each and every question at the end of the webinar, and we just have a great time. We always have a blast. So if you haven't taken my webinar, please go and check it out. All you have to do is go to my website at www.theartistnextlevel.com, and right in the homepage you will see a big button that says the 7 steps to a killer exhibition proposal. So click on there, pick the date that works best for you, and I will see you at the webinar. Super cool. Well, my friends, today I have a guest with me, which is Doug Frohman. Doug Frohman is a contemporary artist working in Chicago. His explorations into painting draw upon minimalist, color fear, and architectural influences. His work has been collected and exhibited widely across the United States. Doug is currently represented by 4 galleries across the United States in New York, Chicago, Atlanta, and Columbus, Ohio. In 2016 and 2017, he exhibited at 6 top U.S. art fairs, including Context Art New York and Art Basel Miami. He has worked extensively with corporate art consultants, interior designers, and architects, executing commissions, installations, and sales to private collectors. Finally, Doug is my guest curator at the Eaton Center this month for the exhibition titled Vitality Rising, featuring the works of Daryl Roberts, Rebecca Moy, Doug Frohman, Pamela Stockert, and Ford Kroll. So you don't want to miss and Ford Kroll. And I'm super excited to have in the podcast today, Doug Frohman. Hi, Doug. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Sergio.
Are you ready to take us to the next level?
Yes, I am.
Fabulous. So, Doug, I really want to thank you for being here in the podcast today. We're going to share some of your story as an artist and also as curator. You have right now a beautiful exhibition you curated for us at the Eaton Center. It's called Vitality Rising. So I cannot wait to also talk about that with amazing artists that are part of the show. The show runs from March 16 to April 14 at the second floor gallery of the Eaton Center. So I've been looking at the work prior to the show, and then as the installation went up, and then now that the show is up, I like to, when I'm at the center, I like to take walks through this vast space of the gallery, and every time I discover something new that I hadn't seen in the works, which is, this is really, really a beautiful show. For those of us who love painting, it's really a feast for the senses, for the eyes, and, for what we will love about painting. So super happy to have you here, though. So, how you doing today?
Well, I'm doing great, and it's really gratifying what you said about the show. That was really what I was after when I imagined it, and the artists that I called upon, all of whom I know, and their work that inspires me. And the idea was really to be able to create something that the artist's work was in one area, but there was a dialogue that would happen with the artist next to them. And what you were reflecting about seeing something new, I think we were able to really make that happen.
Absolutely. And so we're going to spend some time talking about Vitality Rising. But before we do that, I would love to hear a little bit more about your story, because here at the Artist Next Level podcast, we love stories. We love to hear from the artist how you became an artist, where you grew up, and what was that point for you in which you said, well, I think art is for me.
Well, thanks. I grew up in the Chicago suburbs, and I felt like it was a great time to grow up. It was a period of kind of conformity, and everything was pretty easy peasy, and not a lot of innovation or anything. And what changed? So there was a good foundation, but the Cuban Missile Crisis really was a point of change, and the assassinations of John Kennedy, and then Dr. Martin Luther King, and then Robert Kennedy, and the Vietnam War, the protests, all of that turmoil just became my life. It changed from before, and it really had changed for everybody in different ways. But, for me, it really kind of woke me up, I think, and I kind of compared it to like, I was riding my bicycle down the street. It was pleasant and it was sunny, and then kind of slammed into a brick wall. And all of a sudden, we had Nixon. So I'm not making this political, but just culturally, what was happening alongside of that, for me, was music. So 15, I started playing guitar and bass. My brother played guitar, and that was really the center of our world. The Beatles and all of the Jimi Hendrix and Cream, and the kinds of music that was being made was very revolutionary, but it was also inspiring because it required a lot of skill and a lot of imagination. So I think that became kind of my sort of key point of wanting to be an artist. In this case, it was music first, and then it sort of evolved a level further, talking about next level, when Miles Davis got younger musicians like John McLaughlin and Keith Jarrett and Jack DeJohnette, and they created fusion, which took rock and jazz, and then it was a synthesis. So that kind of, first of all, mastery of a craft. These were people who were young, but they were unbelievably imaginative, talented, and they worked as a unit. So those kinds of ideas, I think, are at the basis of everything that I became and think about as an artist.
Fabulous. Now, did you go to art school here in Chicago, or what was your education like?
So I went to Washington University in St. Louis, and
St. Louis, okay.
Mm-hmm. And they actually had quite a good painting school, but I had about 6 months, and there were some things that happened that really knocked me off course, and so that it kind of life situation type things. So I really didn't have any more art school. I majored in anthropology because you could travel and get and study people and get college credit. I thought that's the best way to go to school is not to go to school, but to go places where people were different and learn about them and write about them. So really. At the same time, I really began to be an artist, and sort of overtook the music, which has continued but being an artist from that point, sort of post-college, was my orientation.
Got it. Fabulous. Well, that's awesome, though, your story, to hear your story. And, as years pass and so on, as artists, we evolve, we change. And how would you describe the work that you're doing right now as an artist? Like, what are some of the things that are in your mind, that are your current concerns? And how would you describe the work?
Great question. The sort of two different things. I think that, what I talked about those creative influences were translated into visual effect. I, not having the art school, but what I did was I met and worked with some very, very talented professional artists, and started just to pick up what's it like, what do you do every day, the materials, all of the sort of pieces and parts of it. I just observed the people I was working for and working with and picked it up that way. So it's very experiential. I think the whole thing, if I had to use one word about my sort of, trajectory, and then as far as what the work is about, it's abstract is what captivated me. There's a certain amount of mystery for me in the making of abstract work. I had been, since college, studying yoga and meditation, and I'd been lucky to meet some lineage holders, which means people who come from Tibetan or Indian, certain traditions who have mastered that line of study. So I was influenced by that to come up with something that essentially, I think the idea in simple terms was that to create something that hadn't been there before, that was now, it had a presence or it had a character to it visually in terms of the materials, which were always important, the surface and what you did to distinguish things. So it became kind of, the anthropology was never for me about, digging up, bones, but the anthropology was more of a study of people or a study of life through the means of painting. So it was a ongoing learning and getting to eventually that title, Vitality Rising, is sort of a good example of something representative of that direction and that effort.
Right, got it. And color has also been something important in your work as well, right? Some of your paintings are quite vibrant, and then some of them are more quiet. So you have those both, which I love about your work as well. For in one moment, you may be encountered by this bright red, and then in another piece, maybe a much quiet, almost like that meditation that you just mentioned about. That sense of soothing yourself and finding that another realm of understanding.
Well,
so tell me a little bit about color.
Yeah, that's very, you nailed it, because to me, color, like Matisse, like Diebenkorn, artists who are very important to me, color has a depth and a quality that goes beyond words. And I think a lot of the work has to do with balance, but not necessarily making one side equal the other. But again, like in a piece of music, there may be a fast section and then it's slow and it's quiet. Now it comes back. So it's compositionally an idea of things that, not just things that have to go together and all be neat and balanced, but almost like you've come upon, a garden or a patch of woods or something, and you see things in nature. And the comment you made about before about going through the gallery and seeing something different, that to me is the goal, because that to me represents that there's a vibrancy, that there's a original kind of an approach, and then that the effect, again, back to the materials, you're able to, or I'm able to realize that on the wall or on the canvas.
Fabulous. I think that's a wonderful, beautiful description of your work, though, and I think for our friends who have never seen it, we're going to share later on also your website and your social media links so they can go see it and, get a visual for what you just expressed, which is really nice. So let's now talk a little bit about, and you touched up on some already some things about Vitality Rising, which is the show that we have up right now at the Joby Art Center, which had a beautiful opening already, and now it still continues, so the show can still continues. And So let's talk a little bit about that. What is the main idea that, or how did you came up with the idea of Vitality Rising, and what was your process for the selection of the artists?
Yeah, Sergio, that really goes together because all of these artists, to talk a little bit about the origin, I wanted to think about something. I was thinking about a small group of artists, and then I was thinking about giving it a direction, which I think titles, are very interesting. Some artists just don't bother. It's untitled for, and I feel like the title can be a doorway for the viewer. It can give some indications, and so I wanted to hit something that was very universal, very primal, but at the same time, you couldn't just sort of nail it down and describe it. So to me, I was thinking about, people say, well, the only thing you can't replace is your time. So your time is the most important thing. And it is. But then we thought, even more, your vitality. You were talking about being a little under the weather and Yamina and your son, So the vitality is what really sort of defines the value, the pleasure, the goodness of what you're doing. So a person, if, you could have lots and lots of time, but if you're, impaired or you're in a wheelchair or something, that time isn't so great. So to me, the vitality then became this quality that touches everything and that people are after in different ways. And so that seemed to be a great sort of just a concept that was responsible for a lot of things, but you couldn't easily pin it down. And so for the artists, all of them, Rebecca Moy and Pamela Staker and Daryl Roberts and Ford Crow, who was gracious enough, he and I are working on a business project I'll discuss, but he was gracious enough to ship his work and come out and be in the show. So I think that when you say, well, why these artists? These are all artists that I admire the work and their practice, how they sort of get there, and what it means to them. And so I felt like the best way of having that dialogue was to have the best artists that I could find who, for me, created that in their own work.
Right. And there's a singularity to each artist's work where, such a big show as this one, you don't feel like, it's overwhelming, but rather the way you curated the exhibition, each artist has a space or an area within the gallery. So it gives you a better understanding of each artist, and when you move to another artist, which is also, I think it's valuable for this type of exhibitions, because then it really hones into the type of work that each artist is doing.
Well, and, it's interesting that you say that, and we were working with James, who did a fantastic job of really helping us hang the show, and Ronnie, who works on your team. One of the great things that artists who are hearing this and curators and so forth, the gallery is huge, and it also has the benefit of being able to move the wall. So you can configure them in certain ways depending upon your goal. For me, the goal was to be able to see across, a big distance that would show you one artist and then maybe half of another artist, so that that dialogue happened because you were able to open up the space, removing those walls. And that, led to, what we did. I mean, in the way, for example, we hung Daryl's work in certain configurations that were different. and work that he hadn't shown before, for example. Rebecca Moy had a huge, gorgeous piece that's in on one of the walls, and you can see it from afar. So to be able to do that, it was great, because usually with a gallery, it's a box. I mean, let's face it, or it's a rectangle, and that's about, this gave more things to think about, more choices.
Yeah, there's a playfulness to it, and like I said, it's not an enclosure with each artist is in its own enclosed space, but rather it's kind of fluid. It's a more fluid space, almost like, the paintings themselves, where you move from one shape to another, from one color to another, but you're still part of the same large canvas, and that's how I see it. And I think it plays really nice.
Yeah, it's sort of like cohesive. A piece of music. Yeah, it's very cohesive, and it moves in such a way where, like you said again, you get new perspectives, and of course, we're both encouraging people to see it in person. You see it on social media, and that should just be like an invitation, because gives you an idea, but being there's no substitute.
Right, which I always tell, is in the screen everything looks the same size, but when you're in front of some of these which are very large, and there's also some very small too, like some of Daryl Roberts, which are really small, highly covered in layer after layer of paint. The image, the photograph flattens it so much that you cannot miss it, and that's why, like, when I did a quick video, I really wanted to show that three-dimensionality of Daryl Roberts' pieces, and kind of like went around them, because you lose it if I had just showed a quick picture,
and I actually, when I saw your video, I thought, hey, I'm going to do that also. So I have a video that I'm just kind of working on making sense of, and it's sort of meant to be able to not show everybody everything, because, like we're both saying, you really can't experience the surface. And for artists, one of the things, ultimately you're working with a surface. Some artists relate to it as a skin. And so there's something live about it. There's something juicy about it, that you can't see on the screen. So that's the sort of payoff almost for the artist of, you may have an idea, you sketch it out, but by the time you finish putting it on a canvas that's 4 feet high by 6 feet long, you have a more living entity than you had in mind.
Exactly. So what was your process for selecting the works? Like, did you go to each of the artist studios, like Rebecca's and Pamela? And I know Ford, he's in New York, so it was a little bit different. And I think it helped that probably you knew the artist firsthand. But what was the process of selection for you, for each of the artists?
Well, I think it was the same for everyone. I, had invited them into this show with this idea, and it was going to be at the Zhao Brothers Art Center. So everybody was just excited about that. Before I elaborated, they were excited about that. And I told them about the second, some hadn't been to the second floor. So from there, it really came to, I let the artists decide more than that I dictated. I really did not dictate. I think that for different artists, they had different notions. So, for example, Daryl, as you said, had a lot of pieces, and they're in different configurations. One of the things that I did do is advise people as things were going up. That's where, so as far as selecting the work, that was pretty much, it wasn't that it was hands-off for me, but I was really encouraging them, and we had a bit of a dialogue about it, and I went to their studios and I photographed some things, but it was really mostly, if not totally, their call, what they thought was the most exciting, and with this idea of dialogue, And then when we got to the actual hanging was when I made some suggestions. Not every single one was taken, but a lot of them were good. And they, had to do with how would this be shown in an interesting way. In the case of Daryl, for instance, we were able to have different configurations than one might expect. Like as you enter and turn to the left to the gallery, you have this long, long row of double painting. So usually you would
almost like walking in between. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Usually you would expect something single, and so we didn't. And then in another part of the gallery, we had, instead of a group of work that everything was next to each other, we just arbitrarily took a space, not arbitrarily, but down the middle, and put them on two sides. And it's something that the mind isn't necessarily expecting. So the feeling is it's going to engage more because it's something that's fresh.
Exactly. No, and it makes it also for a quite interesting experience on the visitor who comes to the show, to go through it and not to see, the repetition in terms of how it's the show presented, but rather, each artist not only presents a different unique kind of work, but also in the way it's presented, it has also its own characteristics, which, as you mentioned some of the samples too.
Yeah, and I think also the last point there, because it does make such a difference, being able to take a wall out of a certain place where a person would expect it, and so instead you're seeing twice as far to work that has been arranged. You really have two things there that both contribute to making something that would be terrifically choreographed but not expected.
Right. Fabulous. No, I think that's great. Thank you for giving us that insight. And curating an exhibition is a lot of work, and you know it very well, and I know it. And sometimes people think that you just come and hang the pieces and you call it a day, but it's so much work. It all starts with processing an idea and bringing it back and forth in your mind and trying to make sense out of that, and going and searching for artists and the appropriate artists, and then defining the space. There's so many things that go on before the show, during the show, and after the show. And I just want to say it's been really a pleasure working with you, because you understand that, and that is wonderful.
Well, the one thing I'd say about that, and I think in your Art and Next Level, you and Yanina, you talk about this, and it has to do with people's attitudes about themselves and their career, projects, etc. So since we're talking about curating, or we're talking about a group show, I think that what's worth mentioning here that's particularly relevant is the idea of saying to people, come up with something that you think is exciting. And don't worry about, how much work it's going to be, and you're going to have to pay for the truck and the, get off all that and think about what is it that could be exciting to other people, whether they're curators, whether they're collectors, whether they're not particularly into art. So you start with that vision and then put together the pieces. And I think that a group show like this gives you a lot to work with. And you also have the energies, if they're the right people, and these were, you have the energies of the other artists to suggest and help and so on. So I think people should push themselves and stretch and try to think big, because the audience will come. And we had a great turnout, and I've gotten a lot of response from people. And maybe we should mention that we are going to have a art party at the closing of the show.
That was my next question. So wonderful that you bring it up. Yeah, so the show is not over. People can still come and visit the exhibition. And you can go online to jobyartcenter.com and find some of the details. But we really want to invite you to come and see it in person. That's really what makes a difference in an exhibition, coming and seeing the work face to face, and not only that, but also meeting the artists there too. So tell us a little about this, the artist talk, the closing reception that we will have, and the dates, the time, and anything that you can give us.
Yeah. So what we did, because the center is busy with different things, we selected Saturday night, April 14th, starting at 6:30, and wanted to kind of make it more fun and more involving. So we are going to have what's called a drawing for a drawing. And so you send your email address, and we'll figure out the email address. And that is your ticket, as it were, into possibly being chosen. And we're going to choose it on the 14th. And someone will win a professional level art piece from one of the artists in the show. I would say it probably would have a value if it were in the show, or of at least $1,000. And we feel like that, yeah, it's a big stretch to just give away a piece that isn't really for charity. In this case, we just want people to experience what we've done, and this is sort of an incentive. So we'll put this out on social media and so forth. We do plan to have some very nice wines there, not the typical gallery fare. I think it'll be a great time, and we're excited
Fabulous.
to have. Yeah.
That's a great offer. Absolutely. Now tell us the time. What are the times in which our friends can come and check it out?
It's 6:30. We'll start 6:30 to 9:30. So it's an evening. It's a Saturday evening. So get your babysitter now. I know that
that's right.
That's a factor, and it should be considered.
Right.
And so I think it'll be.
Fabulous.
I mean, we had a great turnout for the opening. We could have. It's a big space, so you'll be able to walk around and have time with the work and with the artists.
Yep.
I think it'll be great.
Yeah, and there will be also an artist tour where the artists will also talk a little bit about their work too. So I think that's kind of a great experience when you can hear the artists themselves, telling their experiences, their stories.
Well, that's a great thing that Sergio and I were talking about. What would really, again, what's going to be interesting, a little different, engaging. So instead of having a panel discussion where the 5 artists are sitting, like a court or something, and the people are sitting in chairs. We're going to be up, and there won't be any chairs. What we'll have is we'll have plenty of time to mingle and have a glass of wine and talk to your friends and look at the work. And then what we're going to do is have each artist will move to their area of work and have them talk about their work, a sort of condensed version of what Sergio and I are doing. They'll talk about their work, and they'll also be able to take questions from people who are interested in various aspects of the work or their practice, etc. So we'll walk around to each artist and spend a little time there, and I think that'll be a way of stimulating a lot of interest as opposed to sitting and doing it the other way.
Right. No, I think that has worked really well for me in the past too, and I think it's going to be really good because it's more active, especially for a big space. If you have a small gallery space, well, the sit-down setting kind of works well, but since we have big space, it's massive and helps people to walk through the space and to experience the work as the artist talks about it. It just makes total sense, and I think you will be in for a great experience if you join us April 14th. 6:30 to 9:30 p.m. for the closing of Vitality Rising. So Doug, that has been a wonderful conversation with you. We're getting towards the end of the episode. And before we go, I would love to ask you also if you can share, where can we find you online and maybe Instagram and Facebook or whatever you may be at. If you can share that with your website, that would be great as well.
Sure. My website's my name, Doug Frohman. My Facebook has, I think, about 1,200 people. So they must have found it. I think the easiest way on Facebook is you just put the person's name into the box. Same with Instagram. That's, I'm in different places, and it's fascinating sometimes to me how people reach out and find me. I wanted to just quick mention one thing, which is that Ford Crow, who is from New York, he and I are partners in a new venture that is just launching. Yeah, it's called Art Selective, and the website is artselective.com. And what it is an artist-run advisory service giving interior designers, corporate and residential art consultants, public curators, and individual collectors access to a large, exclusive pool of top professional artists across all mediums. And the way we work is people contact us, and if they have projects, we match them up with artists, no cost for any of that. And when they decide to work with somebody, then, they sign an agreement and go forward. And it's a way of, we felt, to streamline the process, make it a little easier both for the clients and then also the designers and curators, our consultants and curators, to find work that they wouldn't otherwise know about, and be able to connect with these people, very easily. So Art Selective,
awesome. Art Selective. Mm-hmm.
That's what
so
we're
it's
doing.
artselective.com?
Right.
Okay.
And come on, come
is
on.
the project? Yeah, is the project already launched, or you're in the process? Okay, so it's already up and running.
Awesome.
We're
already in the first conversation. We have the website up so people can look at it. Awesome. And we're up and running.
Awesome. Beautiful. That's awesome. Thank you, Doug, for sharing that as well. I think it's a great resource that we invite our artists to check out for sure, and be part of as well. So, with having said that, my friends, we want to thank you for being here. Any last words, though, before we close for today?
No, I appreciate the opportunity. Working with the Jalby Art Center, everybody there is really a pleasure. I'll say to artists and curators, it's a treat, and we are excited. I think that the artists were really gratified with the results, and people who've seen it. So
great.
If you haven't, you should come over and enjoy the work.
Exactly. So the show Vitality Rising open March 16. It's already up and running until April 14, which we will invite you to, as you heard today, to the closing reception for the show. Don't miss it, April 14th, 6:30 to 9:30. And if you listen to the podcast, let us know when you come to the opening. That would be awesome. And if that's how you found out about the event. So, my friends, thank you again for listening today. Please share this episode with your friends. That's one way in which you can help us to get this podcast to more artists as well, so that we can all learn from each other. Thanks again for listening, and I will see you at the next level.
Check out our website at www.theartistnextlevel.com, where you will find our podcast library, learn about our upcoming webinars, find resources relevant to your career, and much more. Thanks for listening to today's podcast, and we'll see you at the next level.